So thank you very much for having me today. I love talking about design, and I love this project. So it's a real honor to be here. Who's heard of design thinking? So not some of you and not many of you. So you're not alone. Most people haven't, and so we end up getting projects through our company, typically kind of coming through the back door. So someone's doing a strat plan, and then we respond to the RFP, and we get in there, and then we kind of trick them into believing that this design thinking thing will work, and they let us do it. These guys called us, and they were so excited about design thinking, and had actually heard of it, and had been reading about it, and that's such a joy for us because there's just not many people doing this work, and that's really incredible that an agency like this would embark on not just a design thinking project, but a 2-year design thinking project with really big goals and with a really ambiguous outcome at the end. This is part of the work. We don't really know where we're going to get to, but you follow a process. I'm going to tell you about that process. And you know that when you get to the destination, you're in the right spot because you follow the right steps. So, in 2012, we were doing a patient experience project in a hospital, and we were chatting with a patient in the emergency room of a large hospital in the GTA. And it was the hottest day of the summer. He had been building a deck. He had nicked his hand with the saw. He was in the ER waiting, and he needed stitches, but it wasn't very serious. And so he was waiting for a long time. It was really busy that day. And we were talking to lots of folks. We chatted with him a little bit. And he said, it was my own fault. I should have been more careful. I get that I have to wait. This is all fine. I'm just really cold. I'm freezing. It's the hottest day of the summer. The AC is pumping in here. He was wearing like a little t-shirt and shorts and flip-flops. He'd been building a deck in flip-flops. But anyway, he was cold. He was really, really uncomfortable. And he didn't feel like he could ask for a blanket because he was aware that it was really busy. And he knew that how much trouble he got in. The parking was challenging. There was construction at the hospital, and he couldn't find the right door. And he didn't want to bother people. And he just wanted a blanket. And this became this really interesting moment in this was a strategic planning process, and we were doing a patient experience piece of work for the CEO of that hospital, who said, I can fix that problem. Like, that's not an expensive problem to fix. It's more complicated than you might imagine to just get some blankets in an emergency department, but we can do something about that. It's not going to break the bank. It's not some crazy technology. It's actually a super old technology. It's a blanket. And we can do that, and we've never thought to ask, are people comfortable in the ER? And so it was this that got surfaced. And for them, a really profound moment where they realized there are problems we can solve for people that dramatically enhance someone's experience in that moment. Conversely, we also talked to lots of folks that were at the end of their life. And a similar sort of sentiment came out about wanting to feel dignity in death, not wanting to be alone while they died. And it was the same kind of moment for this group where they realized, started conversations about a no one dies alone policy, where everyone in the hospital, from the administration down to the cleaning staff, were empowered to just go and meet with someone if they realized they were in their final moments, or they realized that this was a terminal patient that didn't have very long. You were allowed to go and encouraged to, if you wanted to, of course consent and all the pieces were in place, go and be with someone in their final moments. And again, not terribly expensive, hugely transformational for a person's experience in that situation. And so two opposite ends of the sort of emotions coin, one very heavy hitting and one not so much. But in both cases, ideas that surfaced from talking to patients, understanding their needs, understanding the things that people are trying to get done in any given situation, and finding ways to satisfy those needs. So a lot of design thinking work or design work in this kind of space is about complex problem solving. So the difference between different kinds of problems, an easy problem is figuring out how to get here through all the construction. So you can do it, you can figure it out, you can imagine a way. Yes, the eye rolls. It is very hard, but you can do it, you can do it. It's not that hard, really. A difficult problem is sending a rocket to space. It's very, very complicated, but we know all the steps. We know that we've got the checklist, you follow the checklist, you get the people in there, you get it gassed up, and up we go, and it's generally fine. Very complicated. You need a lot of skills and knowledge to be able to actually execute that. That's a complicated problem. And a complex problem is often referred to as raising a child. So I have 2 girls. They're radically different. What works with one child, the other child just laughs at us and thinks that it is hilarious in the way that we're trying to discipline her to not hit her sister. It's raising kids is this wonderful example of complexity because you just don't know how they're going to react 'cause it's another human being. Trying the same tactic with 2 different kids gets you different results sometimes. And we don't know if they'll be okay. We don't know what the outcome is because it takes 30 years to get there or 20 years to get there. We hope they're okay. We hope every little thing we're doing along the way works, but we don't know and we have to be patient, and I think that takes bravery. So complex problems in design work are often called wicked problems. And wicked problems are particularly resistant to resolution because as you make progress in that problem, as you feel like, okay, we got over that hurdle, you're suddenly up against another wall and you just bumped into a whole bunch of new problems that you didn't realize were there because they were underneath the surface. So design work gives us a consistent way to actually work through these problems, to deal with complexity and to better understand what the problems are around us. So I think that a lot of design work makes complex problems complicated. We find little complicated problems along the way. And a blanket in a hospital is surprisingly complicated because who puts them out? How do they get cleaned? What are the procedures around how long they can sit there for, and all of these various things. Way more complicated than you'd ever imagine just to get a blanket for someone. But not that expensive. As soon as you realize that's the solution you're looking for, you can do it. So there's two main sort of philosophies in design work. I'm just going to make a distinction between the two because I asked you who'd heard of design thinking. Who's heard of human-centered design? So 2, the 2 we work with principally.
I'm curious how that works.
So human-centered design is, these are the 2 bodies, and I'm just going to explain the 2 because sometimes they come up and they're used interchangeably. So human-centered design has its roots in industrial design. If you think ergonomics, if we have to sit in a chair for an entire day, we want to be comfortable, we don't want back pain. That's human-centered design. We're going to understand what you're trying to accomplish by using that object, and then we're going to try and make it as comfortable for you as possible. We don't want you to have long-term, health issues as a result of sitting in this chair all the time. So that's human-centered design, and it's based on the needs of people. Design thinking focuses on the system around those things. So it says not only should we care about how we design something for someone, for patients, let's say, but we also have to think about the system around that thing that we're making. So how are staff affected by implementing blankets in an emergency department? Does anything need to change there? Does a policy need to change there? Do we have to talk to the union about how we're going to get the blankets and the ED and who's going to do that and how much time it takes? Design thinking gives you a way to think about the design and to think in the way that a designer thinks, because we consider all of these contextual things when we're trying to make something. In graphic design, because this would be an example of graphic design, we care about where that's going to be. What's the lighting like? Is it going to be inside or outside? What's the material you're choosing? So we end up getting into all of this contextually specific things, and now we're starting to apply that to human problems, which is really like complex social human problems, which is really, really interesting. Human-centered design cares about desirability. So is this thing desirable that we're making? And design thinking supports the feasibility and viability. So can we actually do this thing? We understand that it's what everyone wants, but is it viable for us to do it? And is it feasible for us to do it? So that's the 2. These are the 2 sort of main philosophies in design. So the way that design works, again, it's a systematic process and it kind of incorporates both of these things I was just talking about. the first thing we do is talk to lots of people. So who's the end user? Who are the people within, the stakeholders that might be affected by the problem you're working on, and where are they? This was an interesting project because how do we go and find parents? How do we get to the parents that don't already know us? How do we make sure that we got enough different perspectives and enough people? And the way we do that is we go out on the street, we go to festivals, we go to parks, we go find people, and we ask them questions. We ask them questions about their experience. We do this in all facets of design. In hospital settings where we do so much of our work, it's a lot easier because the patients, by and large, are all in the hospital or around it, and everyone goes to the hospital at some point. So you're able to get a nice cross-section of folks. These kinds of problems that KW Counselling took on, it's way harder because finding the right people is really, really challenging. So it's not only did they take on an ambitious project, but then they chose one that's particularly hard. Instead of designing something that happens within the walls, they decided to take on a broader community issue. So the first thing you do is talk to lots of people. Typically what we're trying to do there is understand their experience. We want to understand their needs, their wants. We want to understand the things, the problems that we might be able to solve for them. And people find this really scary, which I always think is interesting. We don't ever want to talk to the end user. We don't want to talk to the patients. And I think this happens primarily because people are worried that we might not be able to solve the problem. Something that comes up again in hospitals all the time. People want to smoke right outside the door. They do not want to walk 100 feet from the building. They really don't want to do it in the winter. And that's fair. That is a desire of that person. If I smoked and it was the winter, I would not want to have to walk out and be that uncomfortable. And I think the point is, and that's what we always say to these guys, you don't have to solve that problem, but you should recognize that it is a problem for those patients. I was telling the story at we did some work with a big Catholic healthcare group, and there was a Mother Superior who was on the board of this organization, and I told this story to try and illustrate this point, that you don't have to choose to meet the needs, but you should understand what they are. And I got in trouble from this Mother Superior, which met every stereotype that I understood about nuns. Because she said, who are we to say they're not allowed to smoke? They have a very holistic way of looking at it. But it's, when you talk to people about their experiences, there are thousands of things they're trying to get done. When we process need statements, they're huge stacks, 1,500 different tasks that people are trying to get done in any given interaction. So you're missing something if you don't actually talk to people and honor their experience and understand what's going on for them, and then try to figure out how many of these can we actually solve. So after you talk to people, you find patterns in what you've learned. This is basically qualitative data gathering and analysis. You theme the work, you look for patterns. What do people say over and over and over again? Which of these things is true? And we learn hundreds of true things, from thousands of need statements to hundreds of true things that we know are deeply meaningful to any number of people. And we know what that problem looks like. We have a real sense of how people feel when they're experiencing that problem. And that gives you a lot of really powerful fuel for solving it, and solving it in a way that really meets their needs. When we do an introduction to design thinking workshop with groups, the example we often use, so if I was doing it with you guys, everyone would partner up and you talk to your partner about grocery shopping, because everyone's grocery shopped or bought food at any rate. And the point is, you need to be both the end user and the designer. So if you can't talk about your own experience in a meaningful way, then I can't really design for you. So it has to be a shared experience. So we use grocery shopping. And I've done this workshop hundreds of times with so many groups. And if anyone shops at Zehrs has just launched I think it's called Click and Collect program, where you shop for groceries online and you drive to the grocery store and you pick them up. And it's the best, let me just say. It is so fantastic. I have seen that idea designed and prototype in hundreds of these workshops, because there is a really common set of folks that want that as an experience. So it was really, it was great to see it, because it's like, oh, so many people want this. I know that so many people want this, because we've done this workshop so many times. So you find patterns, you try to understand what's going on for people and how many people kind of experience that. From finding patterns, we make design principles. And I think this is the coolest part about design, because this is the piece you can use over and over and over again. Ideas are cheap. Ideas are easy. They're really not the hard part of this work. The empathy for the end user, understanding their needs, and turning those into principles that allow you to design over and over and over again in a really consistent way, that's, for me, the coolest part of this. Because whatever ideas we come up with today, they'll change. And you can keep designing ideas if you have a set of really well-defined principles. One of the principles that I think has come up in the work with you folks has to do with parents wanting to learn from each other. A really strong desire to create ways for me to learn from other parents that I see as peers. And that's great. That's a great principle. So we can incorporate that in the things that we design. And in fact, we have. So you guys have. So the design principles let you continue to design and be really consistent in that way, and in the way that you're designing and in the kinds of ideas you're building. You can also use those as an evaluation tool. So I keep joking with Diane that you guys should offer consulting services for other agencies that want to design things for parenting education, because you've got all of this incredible research from this wide range of parents, and you really know what it is they're looking for. So anyway, I think you should do that, but we'll see what you guys do.
All in good time.
All in good time. After design principles, you make stuff. You generate ideas, you build those ideas, and Leslie talked a bit about prototyping. One of the things we do in design is actually build the idea in some way so that you can test it and get feedback, and that's the 5th step. You test, you learn from that testing, and you iterate. So in the case, again, of this work, we know that language and writing and content is a really big part of breaking through on Facebook or breaking through on social media. And so the prototyping is testing, for instance, a number of different ways of writing the same piece of content to see how people react to it. And when we do feedback, and if you take nothing away from me being chief dude and this whole talk, take this away. The way we ask for feedback typically is terrible. Because when I ask you for feedback, you think I want negative feedback. And I do, but I also want you to tell me what you like. So if I designed this thing for you, this is the presentation clicker, I'd have you use it. So this would be the prototype. I'd have you use it. You tell me what you thought of using it for a presentation. And then I would ask you what you like. What do you like about using this thing? We never ask people what they like about things, which I find so weird, because we might throw out a great idea because we just didn't ask. So what do you like about it? How would you improve it? And what questions do you have about it? And asking people to ask you questions about an idea is a really nice way to make them work a little bit harder on their negative feedback. Saying, I don't like it, doesn't tell you anything about how to fix it. So force people to ask you a question. So those are the 5 steps. Talk to people, find patterns, make principles, make stuff, and then test it out with the people that are meant to actually use it. And you can do that over and over and over again. And this is what gives us this really lovely ability to work in a whole bunch of sectors, because the process is always the same, which is really fantastic. So that's the process piece of it. But another thing that really critically matters is the mindset that goes along with this way of working. And part of that mindset is about openness and not being too precious about ideas. So this is from my friend Linda Carson, who works with us at Overlap, and she's also at the University of Waterloo, and she's a cognitive psychologist and various other things. She's very, very smart. But one of her big things, how to catch a big fish. Number 1, catch a lot of fish. Number 2, throw back all the small ones. So much of this work is about not getting stuck in the first idea you come to. It's about ideation and iteration. It's about lots of ideas. It's about quantity and being comfortable with quantity. So you have to believe there's a solution, number 1, and you have to keep looking for it in everything that you're doing. You have to be open to ideas. You have to be able to kill ideas easily, not being, again, precious about those ideas. And you have to catch a lot of fish. So what looks like when you meet someone who's really creative, so if we sat down, we were having a meeting, we were talking about stuff, and we were spitballing ideas, you might say, oh, Brock, you're so creative, and it's really impressive, and I'm not creative, but you're really creative because all these ideas and so on and so forth. That's just practice. It's just practice, because we do this every single day. And most of us aren't in a situation where we get to practice that very often. Most of us deal with what we believe are closed problems, and most of us deal in environments where we're supposed to have the answer. And exploring the possible answer is not really what we're supposed to be doing. So that practice can be really hard. So does anyone recognize this problem? Yes? One person? You might have seen it in school growing up. So we have a man with a fox, a chicken, a bag of grain, and a small boat. And for whatever reason, he has to get everything across the river. So if he takes the fox across the river, the chicken will eat the grain. If he takes the chicken across the river, that's cool. But then what does he take across? If he takes the grain across, the chicken eats it on the other side. If he takes the fox across, it eats the chicken. So what's the answer? Literally anyone.
Don't take anything.
No, he has to for some reason. He has to for some reason. For whatever reason.
Take the chicken and the grain across, and then take the bag of chicken grain back, and then take the box and grain.
Right. So you take the chicken across,
With the grain.
With the
you come back. Well, you can do it. You can chicken across, come back. You take the fox across, then you get the chicken, you bring it back, then you take the grain back, and you're exactly right. So the key insight here, the trick of this problem, is that you can bring something back across. Ta-da! So if you get that, you're really clever. You're super clever, and if you were in school, you would be, everyone would say, she's super clever, she got the problem, she figured out the trick in the problem. This is a closed problem. These are super useful for kids in school where you're trying to test certain cognitive qualities and so on and so forth. You need a standardized way of doing that. But most problems aren't closed. Most problems are open. Linda's Twitter avatar says, instead of a photo, she has a little picture, and it says, there are fewer rules than you think. So, what's the next right answer? You just said it.
Don't take anything.
Don't take anything across. Great. What's the next right answer?
Build a bigger boat.
Build a bigger boat somehow. What's the next right answer?
Eat the chicken.
What's that?
Drain the pond.
Drain the pond. What's that?
Cook the chicken and eat it.
Cook the chicken and eat it, because presumably that's the reason why you had the chicken. What's the next right answer?
Let the chicken eat the grain.
Sure, let it eat the grain, because presumably, again, the grain is for the chicken to actually eat. There are fewer rules than we think, and openness to ideas is really, really important. And we are presented so often with these closed problems, and we get stuck because we want to have the right answer. We don't want to be embarrassed. Why? Let the chicken eat the grain. Drug the chicken so that it can't eat the grain. And take that across the, who cares? Be open to ideas and generate lots of ideas. It's very, very freeing once you realize, again, there's fewer rules than you think. These kinds of problems create conditions for us to really, really worry about the ideas we're coming up with, to really worry that they're right. And design thinking gives you a way to test them, to make sure that you're heading in a direction that is aligned with the needs and wants of the folks that you're designing for. Getting constant feedback on ideas helps you be less precious about those ideas. We did a week-long design summit with UNICEF Canada, where we brought childhood well-being experts from across the country together. We brought designers, we had measurement experts, we had all these folks come together. And many of the folks that came from the child well-being sector were CEOs of large national organizations. And they were really excited about design, going through this process, and they were creating ideas to better engage with youth. And on the Tuesday night, big reveal, the little idea you just built, we're gonna go downtown to a youth center, and you're gonna share it with the youth that you're designing for, and you're going to get real feedback from them on it. Has it all been set up ahead? And it was awesome, because these people that were so sure of themselves, our later career are supposed to have the answers, had to take the thing that they made from cardboard and construction paper to these youth, take them through the idea, and have some kids say in some instances, that really sucks, or love it. And any feedback was fantastic for these guys, because it gave them the way to iterate that idea, to make it better the next day. And again, I think that takes a little bit of bravery. So finding ways to open up problems when you bump into something that you believe is closed is really important. And part of that is just by generating ideas, not worrying about it, creating space that's safe, and all of that is the mindset that creates conditions for you to be able to do this work. So the steps is one piece, but the mindset goes right along with it. I think in this project, I've touched on it a little bit, but just to sort of finish off, it is really exciting, and we do this work all across Canada. We do a little bit in the States. It is really interesting to find an organization that really wanted to do this, because it's really scary for groups. It's super interesting to find a funder that was willing to fund this. 2 years long, we don't know what the outcome will be. We don't even want to hazard a guess in case that's not what it is, because we don't want to create expectations. And they were cool with it, and a lot of that had to do with the trust in this organization. So it's very, very exciting. I mean, we got into this work because we love working this way, and we love finding organizations like this and folks like Diane and Leslie who embrace this way of working, because I think things can be better. I think better is absolutely possible. And I think this is a consistent way to do it, to bring people in, to invite them to co-design with you. And I think this is how we change things. The walk-in example, when we had lunch that time and you really told me about it in detail, it is a wonderful example of design, and I think design thinking in particular. It satisfies a bunch of needs for folks that don't otherwise want to come to counseling or can't get in, and it takes into consideration the requirements of the system around it. How do we actually do this in this space? I love that you just clear everyone out of their offices and those become rooms where people are meeting with, because we didn't have enough meeting rooms otherwise. So we found a way around that. I think it's a fantastic example. So you should applaud yourselves for being one of the few organizations in Canada that's actually working this way, consistently doing this work, and I think making things better. And just to reiterate again, it takes bravery to do it. It takes bravery, boldness, and conviction to do this work, and I think you're doing a wonderful job of it. So, congratulations for that.